Hi, I'm Marsh, reporting in from a VCR/DVD library in a basement somewhere in Kentucky. This is my new temporary studio space. How would you guys like to know how I made Heaven? In the video, I'm talking about how I processed the drums, how I arranged the track, the different synths I used, how I came up with ideas, different mixing techniques applied. I think I've gone into more depth on this walkthrough than I have done on any other walkthrough I've made so far. To watch the video, head over to sonicacademy.com, subscribe, and you're going to have access to my course, plus hundreds of other courses from similar producers. So hopefully see you guys in the video. Okay, I'm going to start by looking at the kick and the bass and how I've processed and put them together. Starting with the kick drum. Kick drum is from Kick 2. This is quite a new plugin that I've been using. Not just bigging this up because I'm doing a Sonic Academy tutorial. I genuinely love this plugin now. I used to get poor results out of it, if I'm honest. And then I discovered the tutorial on the Sonic Academy YouTube that teaches how to assimilate a kick drum sample from maybe a track you like, or maybe there's a drum sample kick that you have used a lot of times and you want some more control over it. Really recommend that video. This has been such a game changer. Previously I used to drag kick samples into Battery, but you're limited. You can't affect how long the tail of the kick is. You can't make it any longer than it is to start with. You can't. If you change the pitch, then often it can sort of ruin the sound of the sample. And there's all sorts of bits like that. What I love about Kick 2, you can change the length of the sound, the amp of the sound. You can change the pitch of the sine wave. What you're doing is you're sampling a kick drum from a track, or as I've said, like in a sample library you like, you're bringing that kick in and using it as the top part, the click. So this is the click I've got in this one. and then you're using you're sort of cloning the sine part of the kick drum, and that gets sort of mixed in underneath, and you can change the pitch of it, you can change how long it lasts for, all of that stuff. So I love this plugin. I'm not going to go back to battery for my kicks. I use battery a lot for my drums, as we'll get there, but kick drums, this is the way to go for me. I've spent loads of time when I've not felt as inspired to write new music. I've spent a lot of time sampling kicks from lots of my favorite tracks, and I've even gone as far as to make them all have the same volume overall, so that I can quickly switch kicks in a track, and I'm not having to change the fader each time. They each have the same loudness. So here's my kick drum. I like to pick kicks that fit the mix without much processing at all, if any. I've literally just used some EQ here to roll off frequencies under 25 Hertz. Those frequencies aren't really going to be represented in a club, on club systems. They're definitely not going to be represented by most headphones and home audio systems. And the human ear can barely hear those sorts of frequencies anyway. You can sort of feel them. The frequencies are there, but I just think they're unnecessary and they're taking up unnecessary space, so I cut them back on most elements in the track. I then use this free plugin from Voxengo, Span, to make note of where the kick drum hits in the mix. So it's hitting at about 64 Hertz there. I'm just going to turn the mastering on here on my stereo out. This is my reference mastering. So kick's hitting at about 64 Hertz, 64, 65, give or take. I then note that down and I take that out of my bass line to create some space for the kick drum in the mix, using a 4 Q and taking out 4 dB of gain at that area. This is the processing I've done on my bassline. Bassline comes from Roland's SH2. I'm using the Roland Cloud subscription thing at the moment. Big fan of all of the Roland Cloud, the old legendary synths, and I just love how easy they are to. You can control every element, every knob, everything, using the System 1 or the System 8, if you've got either of those. So I can control like the Jupiter 8 or the Juno 106, the SH2, the SH 101. I think they're the main ones I'm using. Is it the SH 101? Yeah. Patch I'm using is a respace patch. I could make my own respace patch. This one just really ticks all the boxes for me. It's nice and dynamic, gritty, and it has a really nice controllable low end to it. It's a pretty driven sound already, so it's quite loud. I'm using Manny's Triple D, which is sort of a really simple multi-band compressor. I love the deboxy part of this plugin. It sort of just thins out, tightens up the sound, tightens up the low end. I don't think it's hugely noticeable in this case. But especially with like plucky bass tracks I've done, this has been really nice. It's adding a nice sort of punch and tightness to the sound. Recommend that from Waves. Next up, I need to upgrade this probably, but I'm using Renaissance Compressor from Waves. I just think there's some better compressors out there now, and I just need to spend some money and buy some better ones. But for the time being, I love how simple this is and how easy to use it is. I'm also using Pro L2. My goal here with these plugins is to get consistency in the weight of every bass note. You'll notice that every bass note here has the same velocity, but if I just open up a fresh instance of Pro L2 and I play the bass line, you'll notice that the bass notes have different weights. And it's not bad, but I just like to have that extra control in the mix and just make sure that every bass note's going to come through with the same weight. So I'm using compression mostly to achieve that, and then I use a little bit of Pro L2 sometimes to really aggressively achieve that. So let's start. The way that I've done that is I'll start with a fresh instance of Renaissance compressor. I love Pro L2. I love the analysis. For the longest time, I was using Smexoscope, which is a free plugin from Smart Electronics, and this is I still do use this. But more recently, I've found that the analysis provided from Pro L2 has been that little bit more helpful for me. Now, just by looking at this, I can see that the third note in the progression right here, that has the lowest amount of weight looking in Pro L2. So I'm just going to loop that section, and then I'm going to come over to my compressor. So I'm going to play the track, and I'm going to note down the level that the sound's coming into the compressor. So it's sort of peaking minus 3.3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my threshold at minus 3.3. I'm going to set a ratio of about 3. And what that's going to do is any bass notes that hit louder than this bit here, they're going to get turned down a little bit. So it's just going to get a little bit more consistency in a bit of a gentle, in quite a gentle way. But then I'm going to, because this sound's not got much attack to it, and it's not, it's a very round sound. It's got quite a slow attack. I'm going to make sure the compressor comes on straight away. So I'm just really aggressively controlling the bass notes, the weights. So now we're getting a bit more of a consistent response here. We can see that before, before and then after. And it's just giving it a bit more of a consistency. So I like that. Now, just to clean it up even more, I might just take, again, go back to this section. Let's look at where it's coming in on Pro L2. About minus 6.7. So I could set my output there to minus 6.7 and then set the gain to minus 6.7. So that's just gonna, the whole thing now is not gonna go over minus 6.7. And it's gonna be completely clean, completely leveled out. That's really important with bass lines, I found, is controlling the weight of every bass note, controlling the dynamics. That is how I'm doing it at the moment. I might watch this back in 5 years and think, what the heck was I doing? But this is working for me right now. I'll turn back on the guys I did before. Next up, we have Shaper Box. Still using this on every track. Just such a straightforward way of getting that sidechain pumping sound without going through the process of sending a kick to a auxiliary and then bringing that into a sidechain of a compressor and then fiddling with the threshold ratio, blah, 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 to get the perfect sidechain pump. This is just so straightforward. Bring it in. You've got these different shapes you can use. I'm using this one, which is like the classic offbeat pumping, and you can control like how aggressive it is. 100% is like goes literally to 0, like completely quiet, comes back, and you can sort of, the more you bring the mix back, obviously you can choose how dry and wet the effect is. I'm using it about 80% because it's the lowest part of the bass line. I really want to carve out space for the kick. So I love this. Now I'm actually also using the traditional sidechain. I've gone back to it in the recent months. I came across this plugin called Track Spacer. Oh, okay. Track Spacer from Waves Factory. This does a sort of a sidechain, but instead of turning down the volume in the traditional sense, this is going to take the frequencies from the kick drum, and every time that those frequencies are present, it's going to carve out those frequencies out of the channel that you're working in. So in this case, the bass line. I only use this subtly. And so I've sent this kick drum is my sidechain trigger in this instance. So I've just like copied all of the MIDI data from my kick drum, slapped it up here, and 0 volume on this. This is being sent to a bus pre-fader. 100% of the sound is being sent there. That has also got 0 volume coming through it. This trigger is then being sent to bus. It's coming into Track Spacer. The source there being bus 20. Reason I've done it this way is so that when the kick isn't playing, I can still get that same sidechain compression happening. Some people will take the audio straight from the kick, but then when the kick stops playing, you get like a non-sidechain section, then it sort of pumps back in, and that can be a desired effect. You hear that sometimes, but I quite like to do it this way, so that even if the kick's not playing, you can still have the pumping going on. Saying that, my sidechain thing pretty much, it does mirror the kick, so we do get some sections where it comes through without it, but the main bit of the sidechain compression is happening from the volume shaper. Anyway, so here we go. You can see that there's the kick drum at the top, and that's what's being dipped out when the kick drum plays. I'm only using 10%, that's sort of the dry wet knob. You've also got this part here where you can change the frequencies being affected. You can do that in Shaper Box too. Love this. I've put it to about 100 Hertz, so it's only affecting like the lowest part of the bass line. I can move that if I want to affect more of the sound or less of it. Just using Volcano here for filtering reasons, just filtering the sound out of the mix at the end and filtering it, taking the low end out of it just in the breakdown. So that's sort of how I've processed it. The Chord bass comes from the Chord M1. Simple sound that we've heard a million times, but yeah, just felt it really fit the rave vibe of the track. And I've actually got 2 octaves of this sound. It goes up here as well, a higher octave. So just looking at how I've processed this, it's pretty much the same processing on the low and the high. I might just have a little bit more I've just changed the way it's compressed a bit on the high one compared to the low one. That's why I've got 2 channels. But yeah, so we've got some EQ rolling off what's not necessary because the sort of the low mid is being provided from the Reese. So rolling that out. Mani triple D, again, just sort of tightening up the sound. Same process on the compression and the Pro L2 as I followed for the Reese bass. Then we got some chorus. Now the chorus is just adding a little bit of a width to the sound. It's subtle. It might be more noticeable on the high organ as well. Just made it a little bit wider, bit more interesting. Again, shaper box. This time less aggressive on the dry wetness, 50%, but same pumping. But I've not done it 100. I've not done it 80% like the sub bass because I didn't want to cut as much of it away from the kick drum. Not as much of it is going to interfere with the kick drum. I've also got the track spacer on with the exact same settings as the Reese bass. So that's most of that. It's sent to some reverb. This reverb is with Logic Space Designer. It's quite a big space reverb, but it drops off really quickly. Compared to, I've got another reverb I use for like really washing out more reverbed sounds, and I use Valhalla Shimmer for that. But yeah, just gave it a little bit more air and cut through the mix more and made it sort of upfront and present. Liked it. There's also these growl sounds that add something to the bass. They came from the original Among Us sample pack that I was given. They're all the same sound. I've just processed them slightly differently and pitched them. So before, this one used to sound like this. So that's from the original sample in Among Us. One sound shifter from Waves took it down 1 octave. That didn't go as low as I wanted, so then I put another sound shift and put that one down by 12. So suddenly we have like this nice bass growl. Decapitator from Sound Toys. I use this to really drive the sound further. Pro Q came in then to just clean up what I didn't want in the sound. I didn't really want the subbiness of it because I've got my sub groove going. I just wanted this to be sort of more low mid. It also had this nasty like high end piece. You can see there. I just rolled off frequencies after 10k just to take some of that away. Mani triple D again, once again to tighten this. And we got the this free plugin from Infected Mushroom Wider to give it a nice wide sound. Before, after. Shaper box, a little bit of the sort of the sidechain pumping effect going on, but only at 40%. It wasn't, again, same thing as the organ bass. I didn't really need to cut much low end out and stuff to make space for the kick, but I did want to sidechain it a little bit. And then a bit of reverb. So this one is going to Valhalla's Vintage Verb. very, very short upfront sort of reverb on that. Doesn't really last for long. The next growl is pitched up. Exactly the same processing. I've just pitched this one 3 semitones higher than the first one, and then the last one, exact same thing, but I've pitched this one even higher, and this one's got delay on it at the end, so it sort of drags out. So we've got with the bass. Final thing to talk about, I guess, is then how I balance the kick and bass together. Really, really important. To show you this, I'm going to quickly turn off my mastering on the stereo channel. It's just reference mastering. Oh, well, actually, before that, I have glued the bass line together. All of the bass, the 3 parts of the bass, they are all sent to bus 9. On this channel, again, a little bit more EQ, rolling off frequencies under 25, cutting out that space for the kick drum to punch through. A little bit more Manny Triple D, compressing it, the same process as before, Renaissance compressor and Pro L. That just tightened it, really gave consistency on the bass line. So quiet now. And once I had that, then I took my kick drum. This is a process I do on every track, and it's to sort of balance my kick and bass. Let me just turn off this. I found this tutorial on YouTube. It's called like the kick and bass trick. Have a look for it. I've sort of adapted it my own way. I take this metering plugin which goes on my stereo output called VUMT. Play the kick drum, and you want the kick drum to be hitting at about -3 dB. So it's pretty much hitting there. I can put up one bit if I want to. So okay, it's hitting -3. That's the first step to this method. The next thing is you add in your bass line, and when both kick and bass are playing together, so the video would say you want them to hit about 0 dB, but I like it to hit about -2 at the moment. So it's around about -2. I also use Pro L2 on my stereo channel with nothing affecting the sound, but just for the analysis. And I like the bass line. The kick is the commander in chief, but I like the bass line to have like almost as much weight as the kick. It just really helps when you come to master the track, because otherwise you're going to have to really limit and squash the kick transient. I like to do that in post in the I like to do that before it goes off the mastering. So I've got the control. I've got more control over that. So what I'm going to do then? So I'm hitting about -2 on the VUMT meter. I'm now going to send the kick and the bass, all of these elements. They're going to get sent to their own auxiliary channel, bus 10 in this case, to just glue it together a little bit more and maybe bring the kick and the bass at that little bit closer together. You can use compression to do that. Firstly, my bass line is glued together on its own auxiliary number 9, and that is then going to that kick and bass on number 10. Does that make sense? So here's bus 10. This is my kick and bass channel. Roll off the frequencies under 25. I'm compressing it. The way I sort of compress on my kick and bass channel is I turn off the bass, I just let the kick play, and I note down where the kick hits at. It's hitting about -11.1, so I'd set my threshold about -11.1. I don't really want to like massively affect the transient on the kick, but I'm thinking out loud now. I sort of start there, and then I might pull the threshold down a little bit, playing with the attack and the release, but sometimes I can get away by, I just don't want, when the kick and bass hit together, sometimes you get a spike still, even with all of the sidechain and everything, and my goal here is again to get consistency on my kick and bass stem. So yeah, so I'd set that to -11. I'll see what I did on the actual instance I used, set it to -12, so I did pull it down a little bit. Pro L2. So I've probably done that again on here. So I've monitored where the kick was hitting with nothing turned on Pro L2. It's hitting at -11. So I've set like a brick wall there. So I'm not massively affecting the transient on the kick. But if they together spike over, then I'm not going to get, I've got the control. Oh, there you go. That is then sent to a bit of parallel compression. I'm using a vocal compressor from Waves for that called CL3, I think. CLA3A. Just, it's a really punchy sound. It's a really punchy compressor setting. I like to use it. I think it sounds good. Now I could slide the I didn't do this, but I could slide the attack forwards a bit more, so I'm catching the transient of the kick, butchering the transient a little bit, but getting even more control. You see that? Sometimes I've done that, but it's probably frowned upon. I mean, I am sort of technically butchering the transient of the kick. But I think it sounds quite good still, but in this case I didn't do that. I just was pretty generous, let the kick punch through quite a lot. Anyway, that's sort of how I've paired those guys, and that, for the most part, is how I've mixed my kick and bass. It's a pretty in-depth way of how I mix it. It's pretty simple, but that's most of the steps I'm taking to mix kick and bass.
Thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate the support from you guys. If you liked this video, then smash that like button, and if you want to be notified about new content, hit the subscribe and the bell notifications. Peace!